Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first day of the Salesforce Platform App Builder training. And today we're going to be going through the Salesforce fundamentals. So just for introduction's sake, everything we're going to be learning here, we've already learned before or we are familiar with it, okay? But we're just going to be doing some revision and some advanced concept. For instance, previously, you know about data models and everything, but right now you'll be doing advanced data modeling, whereby you join two objects together. Previously, you learned about, app deployment and everything, but now we're going to be doing more customization on your app development. So expect a lot of it's a lot of similarities between the things you learned in the Salesforce admin. However, you will learn more advanced things and more complex stuff. Okay, so be aware of that. And for those of you that struggle during the admin session, this is an opportunity for you to also reinforce your knowledge as well as develop your Salesforce skills ahead of the platform developer training. Before I go further into the training, I would like to go through the Salesforce App Builder certification, which is where most of the things which I'm going to be going through will be coming from, okay? So if at any point in time, you want to be ahead of the class or you want to get some better understanding of what Salesforce recommends in terms of their curriculum, then you should be looking at these guides, okay? So we have about, I would say about five days for training, but we've already done this, okay? So if you're interested in this, please watch the video on app deployment. However, when we get to this stage, we are going to be going into a programmatic way of doing app deployment. Previously, we did app deployment using change sets, but when we get to this stage, we are going to be using app deployment using the Salesforce DX, which is much code related, okay? In addition to that, Salesforce user interface is what you are familiar with, okay? I wouldn't go through list view and the likes. I can touch base on it. However, I'm going to be going through how to create custom buttons, custom actions, and how to control visibility of a particular field on the page layout and the likes, okay? So I'll be doing more advanced stuff than the normal stuff when it comes to this. For the business logic and process automation, you already know this. Your project explains this. Your project one, project two has already touched based on this, the roll-up summary, the workflow, the formula. However, I will touch based on flow because flow is now the go-to tool for most Salesforce activities. So we are likely to spend more time on flow instead of having to go through formulas and roll-up summary and the likes. However, I'll still touch based on them. However, but more importantly, I'll be spending my time on flow, okay? Data modeling, like I said, it's the same thing you've learned, one-to-many relationship, one-to-one relationship. We did not touch many-to-many relationship during the Salesforce admin. So what we're going to be doing in this app builder is we're going to go through more of the similarities and the differences, as well as the advanced data modeling, how to use a schema builder to build, and probably how to create custom objects or how to create a custom object using Excel spreadsheet, okay? Previously, we go through the normal way to create a custom object, but when we get here, we're going to be using Excel spreadsheet, which saves you time and the likes, okay? And obviously, the Salesforce fundamentals. You've already known everything here. However, I'm going to be going through why you're using App Exchange. What is declarative over programmatic? As a developer, you might be inclined to using programmatic. Once you know how Apex works, you'll be pushed to using programmatic. But before you start using programmatic, you might want to find out if declarative solution can be used for your application, okay? So everything here we already know. However, whatever I do, I will try to do something more complex so you can have a feel of what is coming ahead as a Salesforce developer. Okay, so now let's go into the training. And again, I'm just going to describe what Salesforce has instructed us to teach for, or to know for Salesforce fundamentals, okay? Given a scenario, identify the boundaries of declarative customization and the use of cases for programmatic solution. The use cases for programmatic solution. Identify common scenarios for extending an org using the app exchange. Apply features and capabilities available to restrict and extend objects, record, and field access. Okay, so what we want to learn here is the profile, the roles, and how it opens up access and the likes. Okay, given a set of business requirements, determine the appropriate sharing solution. Okay, so do you want to share using criteria-based, ownership-based, roles, and the likes? Identify the features and capabilities available when creating reports, report types, and dashboards. Okay, so in dashboards, you already did in a project how to share a dashboard view, how to create a custom report, the use case for custom reports, and the likes. Okay. And given a set of requirements, determine the appropriate global object-specific action. Okay, so when you're creating a button, when you're creating an action, can you create a global action whereby you can reuse on all objects, or you create object-specific actions whereby it's only applicable to the object of interest? Okay, and obviously this maybe I wouldn't touch base with, I wouldn't discuss this, but then again, a charter is just a communication tool, okay? And if time permits, we can just touch base on charter, but I don't plan to touch charter tonight. Now, in terms of bullet numbering, this is what we are expected to know, okay? So let me go straight into the training, and hopefully at some point, I'm gonna stop whereby you guys can ask me questions if you're lost or you need better clarification as I'm training. So declarative and programmatic solutions. When we talk about declarative solutions, what Salesforce wants us to know is solutions that can be done without having to write code. Okay, solutions that can be done without having to write code. And what does that mean? It means if you're given an activity at work and they've asked you to create an app, the first thing you want to find out is, can I create this app declaratively? Can I design or develop this app without actually writing code? Yes, you are hired to become or to work as a Salesforce developer, but you still need to ask that question. Because I know Apex, does that mean I need to start coding? Or are there tools out there that Salesforce has created for us to work with without having to write code? So it's always a question of declarative and programmatic solutions. Declarative tools are the tools you already know. What are the tools you already know? The workflow rules, the process builder, the flow builder. These are tools that you've used in your projects. The workflow rules enables you to update a field. If your manager asks you, whenever we've created an account, we want the contact email to be updated on the account field, or we want something within the account object to be updated, then we know that a simple workflow can do that. We don't have to create an Apex function that would update the field, even though Apex solution can be used for this. We don't need to use the Apex solution. Similarly, if you want to create a record, they've asked you whenever an entitlement is, an account is created in the system, we want an entitlement to be created. You know that workflow cannot create a record. Then you go straight to the next available solution, which is process builder. Yes, Salesforce is pushing for flow, but the ease of doing things is what you look out for, first of all, before going to something more advanced. When it comes to declarative, you want to start with the easiest of things, the easiest of the tools, before you start going into something more complex. Okay, so I want to create an entitlement whenever we close or we convert a lead in the system. Whenever a lead has been converted, we need to create an account. Whenever an account has been created, we need to create an entitlement for that account. Then, maybe Process Builder or Flow can achieve this. But definitely Workflow cannot achieve this. And that Apex solution will be too complex for this, not too complex, will be too much to actually do this. Do you know why you do this? Do you know why you consider declarative over programmatic? We're going to see shortly. But declarative tool is mostly used when a non-complex solution or a non-transaction logic is required. Okay? Now, let's go to programmatic. Programmatic tools are the tools that you have not seen yet, which I hope by the end of this training, you will be able to use them. So what are they? They are the Apex. Apex is similar to JavaScript or Java. It is a programming language for Salesforce. It is used to write code. The same way you've written JavaScript is the same way you write or use Apex. However, Apex is just for Salesforce. You cannot use Apex for an application that is not Salesforce dependent. Unlike JavaScript, I can use JavaScript to match with my HTML and CSS and I create a website. I can use JavaScript even with Java to create a front end of a Java application. I can use JavaScript for anything, but with Apex, you can only use it for Salesforce-related projects, Salesforce-related development. Okay, so that is one programmatic tools we are expected to know. In addition, Visualforce page. What is Visualforce? Visualforce is getting a bit obsolete in terms of progress of the Salesforce ecosystem. However, it is still commonly used by most enterprise. The Visualforce is a way to display content. Right now, we have HTML and we have CSS, okay? And we use HTML to display the content of, a website. Visualforce page is also used to display the content of a website. However, the Visualforce page is inbuilt within Salesforce. That means you can use all these Salesforce cool features like the tabs, navigation. You can just use it, but it is based on the Salesforce syntax. So in HTML, you have the H1 tag, you have the H2 tag, you have the P tag, you have the bold tag. In Visualforce, you have what they call the Apex page, Apex data table. Apex page is to create a page in Salesforce Visualforce. Apex data table is to create a data table in Salesforce. That is the use of Visualforce. So when they ask you to do something that has to do with customizing the look and feel of Salesforce, you're most likely going to be using the Visualforce page if you are working in a classic environment. However, if you're working in a Lightning environment, then chances are you'll be using the Lightning framework. Similarly to Visualforce, Lightning framework is just the advanced way of visualizing things. Okay, so let me quickly go to the trailhead and just kind of like show you again what the difference is with the classic and the Lightning, but more importantly, how the Visualforce would look compared to how the Lightning would look. Okay, so I'm just going to click launch this. Now, this is what Salesforce consider Lightning. Lightning being that you can create components and you can use components. Okay, you can create components and you can use components, and it's fast. The reason why they call it Lightning is because it is based on JavaScript. Anytime you click on opportunities, it's loaded fast. Anytime you click on cases or any object, it's so fast. Whereas if you are on Classic, I'm not saying Classic is not fast, but Classic is like an older version of Salesforce. And the reason why I brought this up is if you can see this, you see anytime you click on an object, it loads. Okay, it loads even though they probably cache it and everything, which makes it faster, but it still loads that page. Okay, but in JavaScript, your page loads instantly because JavaScript is being loaded behind the scene. And anytime you move between objects, it's like you're just scrolling. You're not changing pages. Okay, so going back to Visualforce and Lightning Framework, the difference is just that the Visualforce page mostly look like this kind of look. It has this kind of feel and look, whereas the Lightning has this kind of feel and look. Okay, if you're working as a developer, chances are you will be building Lightning solution. Most businesses are now using Lightning solution, so you're likely to be building Lightning solutions. But we're still going to teach you Visualforce page regardless. Okay, so programmatic tools use case. So why would you want to use programmatic over declarative? You want to use programmatic over declarative because one, declarative cannot solve the problem. But before you can do that, you have to do your analysis because there's still what they call a middleman, or would I say an alternative solution that isn't programmatic. Okay, let's go through the slides and we see consideration for using certain type of solution. For instance, even before you start thinking about solutions, the first thing you want to think about or you want to ask is, can this be configured? Can this be configured easily? If yes, then obviously you know it's a good candidate for declarative. Again, I need you to understand the meaning of declarative. Declarative means you're not touching code, even though you are hired as a developer. You're not touching code. So now if they ask you to design or develop an application, don't go about developing code. Find out, can this be configured? If not, then can I buy a solution, which I'm going to touch based on when we get to the App Exchange? Can I buy a solution that is already in existence? The App Exchange solution is built by trusted partners of Salesforce. So if you're asked to create a sales dashboard, you can spend 8 hours or 40 hours a week to create a sales dashboard. But in the App Exchange, there is what they call the sales dashboard that has all the possible KPIs you could think of from a sales point of view. So the question you want to ask yourself is this: do I want to spend 40 hours to hire a consultant to create a sales dashboard for me, or I want to utilize the App Exchange that gives me out-of-the-box solution that can be done in seconds, if not minutes? Okay? So you want to also find out, do you need to maintain this solution? If I hire a consultant to develop an application for me, would I pay that consultant every other month to maintain this application? If yes, you might want to consider buying from the App Exchange, because buying from the App Exchange would make sure that if you buy from the App Exchange, the partner is under the obligation to provide updates for you, as long as obviously you're paying their token for the subscription fee. So always consider buy over build. Lastly, you consider build. If you cannot do any of this, then try to hire a developer or try to check internally if someone can develop this application. But this is just a general consideration Okay, let's go into more specific consideration. Why should you consider declarative solutions, even though you know that you can develop the solution? For you to consider declarative solution, then you need to find out if there is a budget that is limited. What do I mean by that? If you don't have enough budget to hire or to utilize a resource, why would you want to start Apex code? If not even that, let's say you have $500, you've just received a contract that wants to pay you $1,000 to develop a student management app or a billing app. Are you going to start designing all from scratch, or you will use your projects, which you've already done, and just give the client a preview of your project, and you say to the client, this is my project. I've done this before. Are you willing to pay me $1,000 to do this? Otherwise, I cannot do it on the budget you have specified. So the budget is a key thing when it comes to declarative solution. Don't be too eager to service a client unless you're desperate for the job or you want the money. Even if you want the money, it will fall back on you, because by the time you create something no one can manage, then it's of no use if after 3 months they cannot use your solution. So always look at the budget of the client and offer them what is possible with the given budget. Maintenance. I discussed this earlier, but I will emphasize again. Would this application require low maintenance after development? Meaning that after you've developed this application, can an admin make changes to this application? Can you direct the admin to go to the custom object and change a field if there is a need for it? That's where you look at maintenance of that application. You guys have created an application right now, but if I ask you to add a new object, it's going to be much technical for you because you haven't done the analysis of adding a new custom object to your billing app. But can this be maintained without having to add a new object? Can I add a new field instead to store a record? You want to find out. Time. How long would it take to create this application? If you need an application in a week and it's going to cost developers 3 months to create that application, even though developers can create a very fancy application, you will not meet your deadline. So it's very important you know the reason why the solution is required. You don't want to deploy a solution after the purpose of that solution is gone. So time is of essence when it comes to declarative solution consideration. In addition, limits. When you are dealing with Salesforce, there is what they call the governor limits. The governor limits are the limits Salesforce has put into an org. This governor limit ensures that no one is using Salesforce casually without a purpose, as well as is not using the resources that could be used or that can be used by other orgs. Let me explain further. It's like you're living in a condo apartment. Even though you have your own apartment, you still share what they call the common resources, which could be the pool or the recreation center. If you book the recreation center today, chances are you will use it and you'll be happy. But if you decide to book the recreation center for the next 30 days, that would be unfair to other condos tenants. That means Salesforce is trying to ensure that you do not book the condo recreational center for 30 days in a row without considering your neighbors. So the governor limit is put in place to limit the number of transactions you can carry out. What are the total number of queries you can carry out? This is synchronous, meaning that you're calling one query, then you call the next query, then you call the next query. Asynchronous is one after the other. Like you call, you execute, you call again, you execute. Okay? So when you are developing application, all this really matters for Apex programming. Do you know why? Because you are in charge. Apex programming means I have no limits. Anytime I have an issue that I need to solve, I can code that issue by myself. So Salesforce has put a limit on what you can do, even though you have the capability to code. That's why if you want to send emails, send email is a function. If you want to use this within a synchronous call, it's 10 within a synchronous call. That means you cannot send 10 emails within a second or within a minute. However, if you code your application properly, you can send emails within certain minutes, or you can send emails in batches. Okay, so the governor limit is put into place so as to minimize the use of resources so you do not overwhelm the Salesforce server. Okay, now, what are the examples of declarative solutions? Anytime you hear declarative solution, I want you to think about these things. Workflow rules. We've already discussed workflow rule during our admin. And to access workflow, all you need to go to is the workflow. Okay? And you can choose any of the actions of workflows, such as to send an email, to do a field update, to send outbound message, and to create tasks. In addition, you have the process builder, the same thing the workflow can do. Besides sending outbound messages, the process builder can create records. The process builder can invoke a flow. I want you to know the declarative solutions consideration, because when you are working as a developer, you will be tempted to go and write code. But 60%, probably 70% of the time as a developer, you do not need to write code. You just need to know how the Salesforce works. That's why I'm confident that you guys can work as a Salesforce developer. However, you need to start Googling these keywords. You need to start Googling these keywords and seeing the use case of Flow Builder. Why would you want to use a Flow Builder over Process Builder or Workflow? One of the use case of Flow Builder is it is the only automation solution that can delete a record. So if you want, let's say for instance, you want to design a button, a custom button. Okay, I am on the opportunity objects. I go to all opportunities. I click on, no, I go to all opportunities. I want to design or develop a function that will delete all the selected opportunities. Can you see? I cannot delete all these opportunities. I can only delete them one after the other. Okay? But with Flow, you can write a button, go to the objects, opportunities, and you go to what they call the buttons. You can, new action, you can do this. Write a flow that would create a delete function that would select all this and delete them. Salesforce did not put this delete option in place, but you can now delete them based on your development. This is what they call the app building. So it's not like another Salesforce concept, whatever. It is advanced Salesforce, whereby you're no longer deleting one after the other. You are selecting and deleting based on a simple button click. Okay, so if you want to delete a record or records, then Flow Builder might be a solution. You don't have to write Apex code for it, even though Apex code can do this in minutes. But there are considerations, okay? Approval process, inbuilt automation tools. You can use this to approve a process. Let's say before you give a discount on an opportunity, before you give a discount on an opportunity, you need to send it to your manager. This is where you will put approval button. And once it is clicked, you cannot move to the next stage until your manager has approved these discounts. Okay? Okay, now you say, okay, we want to approve a discount. Validation rules. What is the use case? I gave you a use case of validation rule whereby you cannot have an end date to be less than a start date. That's a validation rule. How would you be thinking when you're developing an application? You need to start considering issues that could happen if the start date of a bill is greater than the end date. It is illogical. But with validation rule, you can ensure that you do not have such situation. Or if a sales rep wants to give 50% discount, that would impact the overall sale of a product. That's something you can put into place, validation rule. And you don't need Apex code to do this. Okay? Formula field, roll-up summary, these are some things you've done before. Okay? So now let's go to programmatic solutions. What are the use cases of programmatic solution? Why would you want to consider anything to be done programmatically? Complexities and limits. If you have something that is practically impossible to implement using declarative tools, what is an example of a problem that is practically impossible to implement using declarative tools? I want to be able to receive notification from an external system and connect the API with my objects. So whenever there is a sale from an e-commerce website, let's say Shopify, when a sale has been received from Shopify, I want to connect that sale to my Salesforce objects. This is complexity. It is not something that can be done declaratively because you are connecting Shopify and Salesforce together. That could be one of your projects during this training. It is possible, but it is complex. So when it comes to complexity, think about programmatic. So don't go and collect a project and say, I can do it. Then the next thing, you start writing Apex code and they only pay you $10,000. Even they pay you $10,000, it's just probably for 1 month. But if you're going to be writing Apex code for the next 3 months, $10,000 does not even suffice anything. So think about it before you start making the assumption that you can do it declaratively. Custom user interface. I told you about the Visualforce page. This page, okay, is very cool. When you're working with the Visualforce page, let me show you an example of how the Visualforce page is. You go to Visualforce pages, okay? So remember, I click Visualforce page. And I want to create a new, just a very simple Visualforce page. And I just say sample page. Okay, I say sample page and I have name. The name is automatic based on the API, but remember, API names do not have space. Okay, I told you the H1 tag, this is HTML. This is why I said prerequisite for the developers program requires you to have the fundamentals of programming. Even though you don't necessarily need to be good at HTML, you need to know the basics of HTML. The H1 tag shows that this congratulations text is going to be bold. Okay, it's going to be B compared to if you use a P tag. So let me just wrap this around the P tag. And I click on save. Once I click on save, I have created what Salesforce refers to as a visual force page. It is a programmatic way of doing things, but we are not doing that yet. Okay, I'm just giving you an overview. I click on preview, and you see the congratulations, and this is your new page. This is Salesforce page. This is Salesforce page. I can create all these items. As you can see here, I can create them in this page. The difference between this page and this page is this is for declarative solutions. You don't need programming to add a part. You don't need programming to show the details of an opportunity. You don't need programming to do all this. You just need the inbuilt Salesforce feature. But when it comes to programmatic, you would have to code it out yourself. You will look through an object, you will get details of that object, and you will display those details. These details, such as opportunity owner, you will display it here. So what is the difference between this and this? This one is given to you out of the box. This one is given to you by Salesforce. You don't need any knowledge of programming to be able to display this kind of layout. With programmatic, you need to know programming, and you can style this to look like your company website. You can style this to look like Blackforce. So when I give you project and I say, using Visual Force page, create a landing page for Blackforce, you can create this using Salesforce. Everything you've learned, HTML and CSS, is this. Everything you've learned in the last 8 weeks is HTML and CSS. But with your knowledge of HTML and CSS, you can start building a page for your company that is using Salesforce. Okay, so let's go back to custom user interface. Business needs to create a fancy looking app and branded colors and images or steps and paths. Okay, now integration. You need to communicate with other systems. This is a good justification for a programmatic solution. Okay, so remember, do not jump into solutions unless there is a need for it. There is difference between workflow, process builder, flow, and there's difference between the use of programmatic solutions. So now let's give an example of programmatic solution. Apex Web Services. You want to communicate, you want to send an email. You know by default, you can send an email using what? Auto response rule. You can send an email using email alert and stuff. But that is limited. It's limited because you are using a feature to send that email. Auto response rule is when you create a record, like a case record, and you want to automatically reply the creator of that case. You see, you're limited. You're limited. You cannot just send an email. You have to create a case, and because Salesforce has what they call auto response rule, then you are sending out email using that feature. But what if you create a custom object? You've created a custom object and you want to send an email. There's what they call the email services. The email services in Salesforce would help you to send an email. Okay? The email services in Salesforce will help you to send an email. We haven't started writing the code, but this is for programmatic solution. Okay? So when they ask you, what is email services and why should you use an email service? You want to use an email service if there's a need to send an email out and it is not associated to a custom object or to a standard object such as case. Okay? You want to create a visual first page. We already demonstrated that. If you want to create a visual first page, then you need a programmatic solution because normal declarative solution cannot do visual first page. Also, you want to use SOAP. SOAP is Simple Object Access Protocol. For most of you, if you're in developers program, you will be able to use SOAP, but I wouldn't be using SOAP for your API integration. It's mostly XML based, okay? XML based in the sense that XML sample, in the sense that your file will look like this. This is an XML sample, okay? As you can see, we have the start, we have the end. We have the opening, we have the close. We have the opening, we have the close. This is a typical XML, and this is how you communicate using SOAP API. This is how you communicate using SOAP API. We also have what they call the REST Representational State Transfer API. They call it REST API. And the REST API is similar to JavaScript. The REST API is similar to JavaScript. Whatever you've learned in JavaScript is how the REST API looks like. As you can see, it just have what they call the curly brackets and a key value pair. A key value pair. Okay? We're not going to go into that right now because we haven't gotten there yet, but I'm just giving you heads up. Okay? The difference between the API communication tools that you can use as a developer. This is programmatic solutions. So you've seen the difference between declarative solutions and programmatic solutions. So how or when can you use this? I've already said everything, but then again, let me just give it again. Declarative activities. When do you use declarative activities? I want to create a record. You don't have to write code to create a record. Unless you want to create record based on complex scenarios. Even if you want to create record based on complex scenarios, you can still use flows. You can still use flows to create this record. Unless it becomes really complex that even flow will get confused, then you use programmatic, the Apex. You want to update a record. You don't need to use process builder. You can easily use workflow. Workflow is simple click, 2 lines, you're already done. Okay, but you need to know the entry criteria when it comes to workflows and process builder. Okay, you want to delete records. I can use flow builder to delete records. I don't have to use, or I don't need to use Apex to delete records. I can use flow builder to delete records. I want to assign records based on logic. Remember, you have queues in Salesforce, and you have what they call the assignment rules. We have the lead assignment rules that helps you to assign based on a particular logic on the lead objects. Then you have the case assignment rules that helps you to assign records based on a particular logic on the case objects. Okay, so remember, we've done all this in our admin class. It's just how can you do this declaratively? That's what you think about. I want to share records. How do you share records? You share records using the sharing rules. The sharing rules in Salesforce helps you to share record, the sharing rules. The sharing settings, you now go to the sharing rules. The sharing rules, you can share the lead record, you can share the account record, you can share whatever object records you've created. Okay, so declaratively, you can do all this. You don't need to code. In as much as Apex code can also achieve this. Create a screen guide, you can use flow. And if you want to remove items, if I don't like this amount field, or if I don't want amount, if I don't want the order number to display when the lead source is web, I can automatically remove this using the field visibility on the object. I think we did something like that in our solution for the bill item. So I think we said when an item is it the bill item? Let me go to the bill item. The bill item. And we said when we're creating a new bill, if the type of service is calls, we should have calls duration. But if the type is something else, if the type is SMS, then we should have SMS use and the likes. Okay? This is something you can easily do with field visibility. So if you go to the edit page, you can adjust whatever visibility you have for a particular field. Bill item, then you upgrade this, okay? Using the dynamic forms. You upgrade this page details page using dynamic forms. When you upgrade this, you select the layout of interest, you finish, then you have a very unique view of the field. So now I can say if the bill item, I can set what I call the field visibility, and I can say if the bill item or equals whatever the bill item could be. I don't know if it's okay, let's use type of service, which is much logical. Okay, equal type of service. Okay, equal SMS. If the type of service equal SMS, okay, then I can say I want maybe this cost to be hidden. Then I can say, okay, this cost to be hidden if the type of service equals SMS. Equals SMS. Done. So if type of service equals, I need to take this off, by the way, because that doesn't make sense. So I'm saying the cost to be hidden, to be shown if the type of service equals SMS. So if the type of service is not SMS, the cost will show, will not show. But if the type of service equals SMS, the cost will show. This is how you can control the fields. And this is declarative solution. This is what declarative solution is all about. How to manipulate things logically without having to code. There is also, let me go to edit again. There's so many things you can do on the edit page. Okay, there is this action, this button here. This button here, show and you can upgrade to dynamic actions. Okay. If you upgrade to dynamic actions, and what this will do is this, you can determine when this action will show. You can determine when the file option will show. Everything you see here, you can determine when it will show based on whatever criteria you've selected. This is app building. App building is logically creating conditions that will solve business problem declaratively without having to write a code. But if you had to write a code to determine the visibility of the action button, then you are solving it programmatically. So if business said, I don't want edits to show for certain users or certain profile, you can just say add visibility, go to device, go to advanced, select user, then select profile. Then you can select name of the profile, done. Then you say contains or equals sales profile. Okay. So meaning that it will only show if the profile equals sales, if it's a sales profile. That's how you condition all this action button for different roles, different profiles without having to remove it. You know, normally in your Salesforce admin, what you would do is you will go to you go to whatever page layout you want, then you go and drag the action away. This will drag the action away for everyone. This will drag the action away for everyone. However, as an app builder, as a developer, you can control visibility without affecting everyone in the system. Okay? So this is, you want to remove or customize a page or field visibility based on page layout. And this is declarative activities. Now, let's go to programmatic activities. You want to communicate with an external system. Definitely, you need Apex because you cannot do it declaratively. Email services. I want to send an email on a custom object. Definitely Apex. User interface. I want to create some fancy looking website in Visualforce page. Then you need to use the Visualforce or Lightning components. You don't necessarily have to use Apex, but if you want to get data into that page, then you will need Apex. Okay? Reports, custom filters. Right now, if I go to opportunities, what are the filters I can do? If I want to create a new filter, okay, I create a sample filter, right? Sample list view. Sample list view. Okay? And that's it. I create a list view and I create a filter for that list view. But these are fixed. These are fixed filter, right? These are fixed in the sense that once you create that filter, that list view will now be corresponding to the filters you've created. But there could be a better use case for filter. If you go to the quiz app, on Blackforce, you will see that we have what they call the filter. I wanted to show you this so you can actually see what I'm talking about. Oh, I don't think I can sign in from here. Don't worry. Let me see an example of a filter. So if you have let me see sample filter. Don't worry, we have to show this because I just wanted to see what it means to have a custom filter. Okay, to have a custom filter, so you can have an idea of what it means to have a custom filter compared to what this filter is from Salesforce, because this filter is perfect, but it is limited to what you've set. If you set the filter, this is what you will get. However, if you want to filter based on certain criteria, then you will be able to get whatever you want. So you can have as many filters here, and you can see those items displayed based on the filter, meaning that I can say, okay, I want more item on my filter. I want this filter and I want this filter. So I can create multiple filters. So how can you achieve that? You cannot achieve that declaratively. You need to use programming. Okay, so if you want to create reports and custom filters, navigation items. Navigation items, when you're doing your Visualforce page, I told you that you can literally build, okay? You can literally build the complete website, navigation, home, about, contact, opportunities, and display those records in here. That is navigation items. And you cannot do that declaratively. You have to use programmatic approach to doing this, okay? So typical scenarios, okay? We already discussed this. Now let's kind of put a break here for a minute, and I would like you to tell me, if I want to find the total number of contacts in an account, how do I find it, and what solution should I use? What solution should I use, and how do I do it based on that solution? So if you have an idea, you can just unmute yourself or raise your hand and I call you to speak about it. I want to find the total number of contacts in an account, and I want to display that contact, I want to display that value on the account objects. Okay, Ola, please unmute yourself and speak.
Yeah, we can go to the report type and create a custom contact report type, because we won't have the contact on the standard report, on the standard report. So after that, we create a report where we calculate the number of contacts. Then we can display that on the account.
Wow. Why would you want to do that? Do you know that? I know you can do that, but why would you go through that length just to display the total number of contacts in an account on the account object?
Oh, sorry, we can actually use roll-up summary, or we can use formula to do that.
Yes. So yeah, it's okay, because you're actually thinking too far.
Yeah.
Maybe you're already thinking as a developer, you're thinking too far. But when you're given a very simple scenario, always go through the basics. What is the model? What is the model? Find out the model. The account is related to contacts. And because account is related to contacts, in a master detail relationship, you can use a roll-up summary to do this, okay? You can use a roll-up summary to find the total number of contacts in an account. If you want to predict an opportunity that is likely to be close won, using business logic, how would you do this? You want to be able to write a field you want to create a field on the opportunity object that will tell the business whether an opportunity will be closed or not, is likely to be closed or not. What solution would you recommend for business? Can someone speak about this? You can raise your hand up. I hope the question is clear. I want to predict, I want this opportunity like this. I want to create a new field, maybe somewhere here, and say likely to be closed, not likely to be closed. How would you do this as a developer? If you've been hired to do this as a developer, how would you approach this? Okay, Diron, unmute yourself and speak.
Maybe this is not the total answer, but you use probability. Is there anything like that?
Yeah, there is Einstein, okay? There is
okay.
Einstein.
Oh, the Einstein, okay.
Einstein, but that will require us to have this thing, okay? You say Einstein, but what I said specifically was using business logic. That means Einstein is using Salesforce business logic. Do you get what I mean? So now you're limited to a particular logic. Okay? And that logic is provided by business, which is complex. So you will use programmatic solution. Okay? But if you just want to predict generally, if you're not using Einstein, you can even go to the app exchange and go use it. Okay? So you don't have to necessarily use out of the box declarative. You can use Einstein, or you can go to the app exchange, or the worst case, you use programmatic solution. Okay? Update all contacts if an account is updated. Because of the relationship, you can actually do this declaratively. Okay? Update and using flow or the likes. Update an external system whenever an account has been created. You cannot do this declaratively because it has to do with an external system. Then you do it using programmatic solution. Okay? Read content of an email and create a content out of that email. Definitely, you have to do this using programmatic. Okay? Committee page to display records based on a custom list view. You have to do this using programmatic. Depending on the scenarios, you can determine whether you want to use declarative solution or programmatic solution. Okay? This is App Builder. App Builder is testing your ability to solve problems using the Salesforce. It is not coding. Everything you're going to learn in this next 1 week is about app building. How would you approach a Salesforce problem? How would you design a data model? How would you solve a business challenge? As a consultant, you're required to know other things, the service, the sales, and the likes. But as a developer, you're required to know how to solve things technically, how to approach things technically. Okay? That's what I'm building you for the next 1 week to 2 weeks. Now, you've seen the introduction to declarative and programming and the likes. Now let's go into App Exchange use cases because Salesforce emphasizes on this a lot. What is an App Exchange? In your admin, I briefly introduce you guys to an App Exchange. And an App Exchange is just a marketplace. It's a marketplace where third parties offer to create an application that is useful for businesses. And as a result, if the business likes that applications, they can pay a token to use that application. That's the concept of App Exchange. If you look at single login, for instance, it is built using the concept of App Exchange. All these applications are standalone applications. Single login is an identity access management that helps you to log in into these applications without having to create an account on these applications. So when you're using Salesforce App Exchange, when you're using single login App Exchange, think about it from that point of view. All these apps can be logged into with one identity. In the App Exchange for Salesforce, the marketplace, all the apps you see here can be utilized, can be installed. So Salesforce is a multi-tenant environment whereby every organization that subscribe to Salesforce license can use the Salesforce objects, security, identity management, without having to configure anything else. The only thing they need is to pay for the license. Similarly to the single login, the same concept is a multi-tenant. You can host multiple businesses and you can install an app. You can install an app. You can develop an app for the single login the same way you develop an app for Salesforce. And once you install this app, you will be able to use it. So now, how does this app, how do they come to the picture? Who create this app? This app is created by Salesforce partners. Who is a Salesforce partner? A Salesforce partner is someone that has indicated that they would like to solve a business challenge. And they would like to make this business challenge, business solution available to other Salesforce users, thereby saving them time and money. As you can see Accenture, you can see Deloitte Digital, you can see Silverline, and the likes. So big organizations are actually creating applications for Salesforce. Similarly, you can install apps that are created by Salesforce itself. This app is created by Salesforce. You can read the review and you can find out if the app is actually useful. Okay, so this app is created by Salesforce Labs. How do you know the authenticity or the sustainability of installing an app on an app exchange? Look at who created the app. That will tell you if this app will be continuously maintained or not. Okay, you have to subscribe to a managed app. Okay, you have to subscribe to a managed app because that's the only way they can sustain the maintenance of the app. And it's usually through maybe subscription or a license fee. Before you install an app into your org, you need to install it into what they call a sandbox. A sandbox is an equivalent of the hands-on org. However, The difference is the hands-on org, you can create it without having a license. As you can see, I can just create without having a license. However, the sandbox, you need to pay for a Salesforce license, and based on the payment you've made, you can create a sandbox out of it. So if you have edition, unlimited edition, enterprise edition, you will be able to create a sandbox. Okay, so have that at the back of your mind. When installing App Exchange, you will need to install for either all users, specific users, or admin only. We are going to demonstrate it shortly. Let's say we want to install what they call the Salesforce Adoption Sandbox, adoption app, which is used for finding out whether users of your Salesforce are actually using your Salesforce. You have two ways of doing this. The first one is you can install this by going to your org, you go to this ... and you go to install a package. For you to install a package, you need to have the package ID. The package ID is given to you. If it's a managed package, you get the ID. If it's an internal package, you get the ID. But if it's an external package, you can get the ID when you're about to install that package. If you look at this package, for instance, if I'm about to install it, so before we get there, you click on Get It Now, and you have the option of installing this in this org, or you want to install in your sandbox. Sandbox is the one you're given if you have a Salesforce license. This one is like a production license, production, similar to production, okay? But it's the hands-on org that we get for free, okay? You accept the terms and condition, and you click on Confirm Install. While you're installing it, I want to, there are some things that you have the option, okay? The option to install for admins only, install for all users, install for specific profile. This is very important, and that is an examination question. You have the option to rename the conflicting components. If you have conflicting components in your package, what does that mean? It means if this package is using an object that it created, let's say it created a bill object, and you also have an existing bill object in your org, what should happen? Do not install or rename conflicting components in package. Okay? And you have the option to install for admins only. If you want to test this, if you don't want to let all users know about the package in case the package does not work the way you intend, the way it's intended to work, then you install for admins only. If you install for specific profile, which is an ideal thing to do, you have a user, which is called maybe package tester. You create a profile for that package tester, and you now install that package for that specific profile. Once you install the package for the specific profile, you will be able to test it logging in into that profile. Okay, but ideally, you should be testing it for the admin, because the admin can test and can see how it will function within the organization. Okay, so I wanted to show you how to do the ID. So if you have the ID, let me see, App Exchange, the Salesforce. Okay, there's a link, appexchange.salesforce.com. It's still the same way which we're doing. The only difference is you're not using a pop-up. Okay, you're not using a pop-up. You're using you have to be in your org. You have to be in your org for this to work. Okay, you're not using a pop-up, you're using a connected browser like this. So it's not going to be like this. Okay, so you can easily see the ID on the URL. You just copy the ID and you can just paste it into the installer package. Alternatively, the owner of the package can give you an ID, which most likely would be private. If they have to give you without displaying them into the App Exchange, maybe it is private. Okay, so you have that ID and you can install it. So other things you need to know about the App Exchange is this. There are three major types of apps you can get on the App Exchange. There's a first one called the native app, which is an app that is built completely in Salesforce. You can create that app by yourself. The only difference is that the app developer has created the app using their own time, and they're giving you to either use for free or pay for it. Okay, the native app means that you can build this completely in Salesforce. And we have what they call the composite apps. The composite apps built with both the Salesforce and other technologies that you might not be aware of. For instance, if you want to find a location on Google, there is what they call the geolocation. It's a Google API that gives you the approximate address and location of a particular place, right? If you want to build that kind of app in Salesforce, you can build it, but Salesforce might not have the complexities of Google's geolocation. Okay, that's why you have to use other technologies in order to make your own application work. And the last one is the client apps that has no Salesforce interface. So when you're using a client app, most likely you're using it from a third-party website, but it is feeding from Salesforce. Okay, so we have the native apps, we have the composite apps, and we have the client apps. Okay, let's go further into the package types. When you're creating an App Exchange app, okay, or an app in the App Exchange, you can create it with either using different types. And the package are usually managed and unmanaged packages. What does that mean? It means if I want to make my application free for other users, I can just create an unmanaged package and just create it. So if you look at this, it says free, meaning that if I install this app right now, that's it. Okay. However, if I need to update this app, I will go to installed packages. Okay, install packages, and you can see the package you've installed, and you can uninstall this package. However, if the package requires you to pay in order to use it, then you will see what they call managed licenses, and you will be able to assign or pay for licenses. Okay, but if it's a free package, you do not have to pay for it. And if you don't like that package, you can uninstall that package and all components will be taken off. In addition, when you install a package, you can click on that package and you can see all the components of the package. Meaning that you can see the fields that was created. You can see the custom objects that was created. Everything that was created as a result of that package installation, you can see it. So you can see the changes they are making to your hub. So it's very important as a developer, you do not install a package in your org directly. Go to the hands-on org and install the package there. Worst case scenario, go to your sandbox org and install a package there. Do not go directly into production to install a package, okay? Then we have whatever it is. The bottom line is this: managed package is when a user actually wants to charge you to use their package, to use their application. That's when you will be paying for the application. It's a managed package. It's not free. It's not available to the public. It's not available for you to use out of the box. You have to pay in order to use it. Okay. So other app exchange consideration. There are other things that you can get from the app exchange. It's not just about an application solution. There's what they call the lightning data. The lightning data, you can use the lightning data to keep data clean and current. That means you can compare the current data you have and clean it up. You have what they call the lightning bolt solutions, which gives you ready to use flows. If you want to use flows and you don't want to develop your own flow, you can look into the lightning bolt solution, which is also within the app exchange, and you can look for solution that has flows and you can just install them in your hub. Okay. And we have one thing you need to understand is that these applications are created by vetted, and they're created and vetted by Salesforce themselves. I cannot create an app if I'm not a Salesforce partner. No matter how good you are with Salesforce, you cannot create an app. You also need to meet requirements. The trust needs to be there. If people don't trust you, they cannot use your app. And Salesforce will not be liable for things that breaks in the org because of their negligence. Okay, so Salesforce takes it very reviews this application before it can be deployed in the app exchange. And also, please do not create an app because you know how to develop models. Try to use the inbuilt app exchange. If you want to create an e-commerce, there's an app for it. You want to create a sales intelligence, there's an app for it. You want to create dashboard and reports, there's an app for it. Okay, so don't just start creating things or building objects in Salesforce because the business asks you to build it. It could just be God wants to bless you and you're already familiar with the app exchange and you just install app exchange for them and it is free. So don't think it's all about creating objects in Salesforce. It is about using what Salesforce has in place to consult as a Salesforce developer. Okay? And let's go into Salesforce security and sharing solution. But before we go there, I would like to take a pause and find out if you have any questions based on what I've said so far, because we're moving into a different concept right now. It's still under Salesforce fundamentals, but it's totally different concept, okay? So I want to find out if you have any questions based on what I've discussed so far, so I can quickly address them before we go into something different totally, okay? Please raise your hands up so I'll call you according to how your hands are being raised. Thank you. Hi, Timmy. Unmute yourself and speak, please.
Hi, Babatope. Thank you. So for App Exchange, if you're looking for a certain solution as a consultant, how do you know the app to use or the one to search for? How do you know the content of an app in App Exchange?
So
or do you Google? Okay.
Yeah, so for instance, a boat solution, first of all, for you to actually start using an app, you have to kind of like research the partner, the person that created the app, okay? Employee digital workspace. What does that mean? It means I want to digitize a working environment for an employee. You can review what they have done in the app, and you can review the description, and you can also see a screenshot. For most apps, you can see a screenshot, okay? However, for let's say Salesforce adoption, which is very common app, okay? The Salesforce adoption app, you can see a sample of what to expect. So if this is something you're looking for, you would have seen it even before you install it. So in a case of how do you know, it's just about research. That's what you're paid for. To look into the App Exchange and find out what solution is applicable to the problem I'm about to solve. There is no a systematic approach to finding a solution on the App Exchange. However, there's always what they call recommendation from Salesforce. If you talk to Salesforce, if you go to help.salesforce.com, you are entitled to ask questions, and Salesforce will give you answers. Submit a ticket. Salesforce will recommend applications for you, but they will not give you the solution. They will not help you to install it. They can actually recommend for you. Okay, so please, one of the key responsibility of a developer is not only to even install an app, it is for them to actually recommend an app for the business. So it's actually your primary job. Okay, how to do it is just you searching, even using Google to search and find out if other people have used this app before and what reviews do they have about this app. Okay, Taufik, please.
Hi, Babatope. I was just thinking, if it comes to a situation where a customer requested for, like a client requested for a certain thing, and you end up getting an app to solve that solution. But after a while, when they were using it, they requested for something else, and that app doesn't provide that. How do you handle such a situation where you're using an app from the App Exchange? You didn't build it yourself, it was a private. So how would you use that platform, or are you going to build something else or at that point?
That's a good question. And most likely when you are consulting or when you're new in an environment, you want to find out scope and project roadmap. So you need to know from that client where they're actually going. So App Exchange could be a temporary solution. But if they're going to be asking you for more features after installing this, more features, then you know that App Exchange is just temporary for this customer. They might eventually hire you full-time to start coding. Okay? So what, again, you need to go to the requirements, and you need to go to why you are suggesting the App Exchange. Remember, budgets, maintenance, time, limits. So if you can install an app that will solve all the problems which they've given you at that moment, you are done as a consultant. However, if you want to retain your job with them, you need to use the roadmap. If you attended, okay, you guys probably did not attend the consultancy class, whereby you have strategies, implementation strategies. You gather requirements, roadmap, which might not be your responsibility, but having that at the back of your mind will now know that you've achieved your own goal. Even developer do not determine the solution. It's the consultant that will determine the solution and tell the developer to do it. So as your job as a developer is not to interfere with the business requirement, the BA and the like. Those people have done their homework. Developers are called to do stuff. Okay, so if there are limitations in terms of architecture, you make it known to them, but the solution architect will be the one to be blamed, not you. Developer, your job is to develop and do a unit testing that whatever you develop works. So let solution architect think about those things that would come up after the implementation of a particular solution. Okay, so have at the back of your mind, there are different caps within a Salesforce implementation team. Developer would develop, solution architect would think about the future, BA will gather the requirements and the likes. Okay, now you guys have seen the basics of Salesforce from an app development point of view. Now, let's see the basics of Salesforce from a security and a sharing solutions point of view. Again, this is a revision class for you guys. If you have attended my Salesforce admin, this is a revision class for you. But then again, the knowledge of this would help you when you are working as a developer, okay? Salesforce organizes data into objects and records. What do I mean by that? If you are working in Salesforce, everything you see on this tab is an object. An object is similar to what you have in a database table. So when you have a table in a database, a user table, it is an object in Salesforce. So if you need to store any record in Salesforce, you store it in an object. The fields are the columns you see here, and the rows are the data you have in here. So it's very important to know that when you have an object, definitely you need to have what they call the fields, which is in columns, and the records. So if I click on this right now, I have what I call the details of that record. The details of the record. Every record in Salesforce has what they call the record ID. This is a unique ID within the Salesforce org, meaning that there is no other records within the Salesforce org that would have this ID. If you're working as a developer, you will be required to find one record that matches this particular ID. How would you be able to create that? You'll be able to create that by writing what they call a query. A query is similar to your SQL syntax. What I ask you guys to create or work on today is a query. So remember, this is the object. This is the record in an object. And this is a field, a data point, a data in a record. When you're talking about Salesforce security, you're talking about how these data are secured in Salesforce. You're talking about how the data are secured in Salesforce. Remember, the data is this. I don't want people to see the amount. I don't want people to see the expected revenue. This is Salesforce security. Okay, so now let's go into how Salesforce really works. You have the Salesforce org. If you just install a Salesforce, you get this org. Now, you have what they call the standard objects. This object that you did not create. It came as a result of you having a Salesforce org. It is called the standard objects. If you have a new Salesforce org, you will have opportunities object, the leads object, the account object, the contact object. These are standard to Salesforce. And there's what they call the custom objects. To create a custom object, you will follow the guideline for creating custom object, which is go to the object manager and you click on custom objects. You have the ability to create as many custom objects as long as your license permits you. In Salesforce, there is what they call the license that gives you the ability to create objects. Okay, so let me go to small business, or I can go to sales and service. If you go to, let me go to the sales and service so you can see the difference, the similarities and differences between different licenses. So when you are working as a developer, you will not have the ability to create objects. You will be limited in terms of the objects you can create. So all the stuff you see that is so cool, you're doing it hands-on org, you might not be able to create them, okay? So I want to see I don't think I can see the limit here. Total number of objects for enterprise Salesforce. 200 custom objects. So let's go to professional, okay? Professional. There is an add limit of 3,000 per organization, regardless of whether they are created in the org, installed. I know professional has limits. Let me see professional's limits. Okay, so contact manager, enterprise 200, professional 50, essential 0. So when you're working as a developer, don't use all the objects. Don't say because it's cool to use objects. You have to use what they call the standard objects. If you have a solution you need to develop for a client, because clients might not have that enterprise edition or unlimited edition that gives them the flexibility of creating different objects, okay? So remember that when you create a record, this is the record, and you have what they call the controls to these records. How do you control access to a record? How do you control access to an object? That is Salesforce security. To better explain Salesforce security, let me use this to guide you. Security starts from org access. Security to Salesforce starts from org access, meaning that can this person have access to this org? This is an org in Salesforce. Do you have access to this org? How do you have access to this org? That is where security starts from. It doesn't start from profile roles and no. Security starts from, do you have a username and a password? If you have a username and a password, then you have access to the Salesforce org. Now, when you're building or you're working as a developer, most likely a consultant, you will be asking your business, what are the limitations from an org point of view? You have the IP ranges and the login hours. The IP ranges helps you to prevent access, network access, to prevent access based on the IP of the business. If the business is not located outside, if the business is not operating outside of Canada, they can localize the IP such that no user will be able to access the Salesforce org outside of Canada. So security starts from the network access, the IP ranges. The next thing for security is the login hours. How can I stop a user from accessing the org? I can use what they call the login hours. I can say within a particular profile, I can say only allow people to log in between a particular time of the day. And you can enable that using the login hours on the profile. Okay, so let's use a standard profile for example. I go to standard and I go down to login hours. Okay, this is the login hours. As you can see, I go to the profile and I go to login hours. You can only give access based on login hours through a profile. You cannot grant access based on login hours through the company. You can give it through the profile. IP ranges can also be given through the profile. Okay, so now what is the profile? Why is the profile so important? The profile is important because whatever can be done in Salesforce can be done through access given to the profile. And any user that has a username and password would need a profile. Meaning, if you go to any user in a Salesforce org, you will be required to give them a profile, because profile is a required field when creating a new user. Okay, so if you have a new user, you need to have what they call the profile. That is why profile determines what you can do here. So why is profile important when it comes to security and control? The profile is what determines whether someone can go to, number one, the opportunity objects. If the profile does not permit you to see opportunity, you will not be able to see opportunity. In the profile for any user, if you go to any profile and you try to, let's go to a sample custom profile. If this profile does not have, if you go to opportunities, look at the standard object permissions, which opportunity is part of. If you go to the opportunities, where is opportunity? If you have deselected all this, you will not be able to see this. If you've deselected all this in the profile of this user, if you've deselected all this in this profile, and if this profile is assigned to a user, the user will not be able to see this. This is why profile determines what you can do on the objects. Now, when you deselect certain things, you can enable certain things and deselect certain things. Enabling certain things such as read means the profile would only be able to see these records, but they will not be able to create a new record using a new button. They will be able to see the records, but not be able to create a new record. If you enable the create, then they will be able to see the new button. And subsequently, if you enable edit and delete, they will be able to see edit and delete. So if you want to stop a user from accessing a particular record or creating a new record on an object or editing or deleting a record, then you need to configure the profile of that user. As an app developer of the Salesforce, you will be required to configure this for the applications you're building. You'll be required to configure the profile. This is part of app development. As you can see, the admin would go and edit this profile once the app has been developed. But it is the responsibility of the app developer to do all this. Consultant or app developer is the responsibility to do all this. However, the admin would go back and edit this if needed. Now, as a developer, you need to understand that even though you can grant access to an object using these settings, you can also programmatically grant access using the Apex code. When we get to the Apex code, you will see how you can check if a particular user has access to edit, to delete. Do you know why you have to do that? Because when you are creating application, when you are creating a custom application, you have the liberty to do anything. The liberty to do anything, meaning that if you create a website to create a case, internally, Salesforce has made it easier out of the box to create cases if you have the permission. But if you are developing a website using the Lightning components, you need to check if this user has access to create, update permission. In Salesforce, creatability. Let me see if I can get that right. So Salesforce has what they call this check. Okay, it's not this one. When we get to the code, you will see it. But I want you to know that Salesforce has what you can use to check is creatable. This stuff you don't need to know now. But when we start developing, you will know it. Meaning that before you can enable people to create objects, to create records, you need to check whether that user can create record. If you want to check whether a user can read a record, you use readable. This is Apex, okay? But we're not there yet. I'm just giving you an example that in Salesforce, you have out-of-the-box solution. App developer using the app builder do not need to start using code to check whether someone can delete a record or create a record. It is out of the box. Just click, 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 you're done. However, if you're creating a custom application, you need to write that code yourself. You need to write the code yourself, creatable, deletable, readable, and the likes, okay? So these are what they call the security check on Salesforce, and you need to know this as a developer. Going back to security check, now that we have what they call the profile that lets us determine what object access and whether they can edit, delete, or create a new record, we are good. But there is more to that. What happens if we get to the next stage, which is the record access? What is record access? Record access is your ability to access a record. So if you have a good profile, which grants you opportunities object, you can only access the opportunities you created. You cannot access other people's opportunities. You're only limited to the opportunities you created. However, the record access determines whether you can have access to other opportunities that you did not create. So the ideal situation, or a very good example, is the use of the role hierarchy. The role hierarchy will determine whether you have the ability to read other people's record. What's the use case for this? If you work in the HR and you have a bunch of people you're managing, there are some profiles you probably don't want the junior HR to see. Then you give the junior HR a role that is lower than you. Okay? So to do that, you go to roles in Salesforce. You click on roles and you can determine, you can set roles based on the organization structure. For instance, anyone with a CEO will be able to see all the records created by the CFO, created by the COO, and the likes. Similarly, anyone in the marketing team The SVP, Senior Vice President, will be able to see the Vice President records. This is how to access records. First of all, you get to see your own record in Salesforce, no more, no less. However, if you're now at the top rank in the business, you can be given a role that will give you privilege to see other people's record. That is security and sharing solutions in Salesforce. So if you're designing an application, find out what is the security and the sharing solutions for this application. Lastly, there's what they call the field access. The field access is this. When you click on the record, you have the details of this record. An example of a field is the amount. An example of a field is the customer type. Do you want anyone to see this amount? If yes, then grant a field access to see this amount. However, if there is someone in the system or a group of people in the system that shouldn't see the field access, then you have to limit it to that based on the profile. How do you do that? You go to field accessibility. The field accessibility would help you to streamline who can see a field. Based on the profiles, you can select the field that you want to stop people from seeing, such as, let's go to the account, such as what field is an account that we don't want people to see. Maybe we don't want people to see the ownership or the employees. Remember, you cannot block field accessibility for required fields, okay? If it's a required field and is required upon a record creation, you cannot block the field accessibility, okay? So now we go to the, let's say any profile such as a sales profile. You go to whatever field you want to block, whatever it is, let's just say rating, okay, or phone. Then you can determine whether this field is visible or the field can be read only, okay? And you say on the page layout, what do you want this field to be? Visible, read only, required, okay? This is field accessibility. This is how Salesforce controls security and sharing, okay? You see, from the org, which uses the IP ranges, the login hours, to the object that uses the profile, to the record access that uses the role hierarchy, and to the field access that use the field level security, which you can achieve using the field accessibility. Alternatively, you can go to the objects, go to the account, and go to any of the fields which you're interested in. Okay, go to account source, and you can still see the field level security and the field accessibility. Okay, so two ways which you can access it, either going to the search or you go to the object and the field itself. This is how you prevent data. As a developer, remember, if you're an app builder, it is easier to do using the interface because it is click based. However, if you're doing it programmatically, you have to use the Salesforce security class that checks if something is creatable, is accessible, is updatable, and the likes, okay? We're gonna get there when we get to developers class, but I need you to know that this is something you need to start putting into consideration. This security is not out of the box. You have to check it whenever you are running you're developing a website for within the Salesforce, okay? So now that we know the security, let's go further into what happens if you want to open up access. This is what they call the sharing. The sharing. How do you open up access? Again, the first thing you use to open up access is the organization-wide defaults. The organization-wide default is what the company has set up, which is, if I have the account object, what do I want the settings of the account object to be? If I have the lead object, what do I want the settings of the lead object to be? That's organization-wide default. What is the current state of my organization regarding this object? If it is a lead object, I want it to be public read write. What does it mean to be public read write? It means anyone that has the access to the lead object would be able to read all the records in the lead object and would be able to create a record in the lead object. That's what it means to be public read write. If you make it public read only, it means anyone that has access to the lead object will be able to see all the leads, but they cannot create a new lead. And if it is private, it means only the person that created this lead would be able to see this lead. Okay? And there's what they call the grant access using hierarchies, which enables the people above a particular lead to see, above a particular user, which in this case a lead, would be able to see all the records created by that user. So the CEO will be able to see the CFO records because of grant access using hierarchies. So if you create a custom object and you do not select grant access using hierarchies, then the CEO would not be able to see the subordinate because the grant access using hierarchies is not selected. Okay? And what you need to know about the sharing rules is that if it is private, you can only see your records. But you can also do what they call the sharing rules on the leads. So this is the sharing rules. If you have it private, you can now use sharing rules to open up access. You use sharing rules to open up access. So you don't use sharing rules to limit access, you use it to open up access. Sharing rules is at the third stage. First of all, you have role hierarchy. First, you have the org-wide, which determines the default state of things. Then you have the role hierarchy, which opens up based on who is the boss. Then sharing rules is what you use to open up access to a group of users based on two things: record owner, who owns that record, or criteria, what conditions should be met before this record is shared with another user. And you can only share with a public group, roles and subordinates. Okay? You can share with a public group, roles and subordinates. And what can you give them? You can either give them a read-only or read-write access. So this stuff is very intuitive, but you just need to pay attention to Salesforce. If you don't pay attention to Salesforce, you will not get it. You need to go over the fundamentals of Salesforce and see what is possible with the Salesforce. Remember, we also have what they call the permission sets. The permission set is also used to open up access, but from a profile point of view. The profile gives you access to the object, fine. Gives you access to edit, delete, fine. But the permission set will be used to open up the access. So if your profile is limited, you can now use a permission set to do what you do not currently have on the profile. And this is ideal if you don't want to grant everyone access to a particular feature. Because anytime you grant access to a particular profile, you will give it to everyone that has that profile. However, if you use permission set, you can assign that permission to a given user. So you don't open up access to everyone. Okay, so that's Salesforce fundamentals, guys. And that's what you are expected to know from an app builder point of view. This is a high-level summary. Okay, I'll recommend you to still go into the admin modules and try to read the Salesforce fundamentals again, because when we start coding, it will be like easy because you know the basic fundamentals of Salesforce. You know what an object is. So when I tell you that query this object, you know what I mean. When I say query, find all the leads in the system, you can validate that this is the lead object and this is all the leads in the system. And you will be able to see the result visually. This is all the leads in the system. Okay, so I'm going to take a pause here. I'm going to stop here and find out if you guys have any questions before we end the class for tonight. Okay, so please raise your hand up if you have any questions so I can address them. Otherwise, we close for tonight. Okay, so please raise your hands up if you have any questions regarding what we've learned, if you have anything that needs to be explained. But remember, everything we've learned today is fundamental. Besides the app exchange, which obviously you're required to know, but then again, it's still fundamental. Okay, tomorrow we're going to go into application building, like data modeling, the schema builder. How do you join things together? Many-to-many relationship. We're going to be doing that tomorrow. Okay, so once again, do you guys have any questions before we end the class? If there are no questions, I think that's good, or I don't know, whatever it is. But then again, thanks for everything. Thanks for the audience. I will see you tomorrow. Take care of yourself and have a good night. Bye, everyone.